There's nothing more exciting and beautiful than the union of two souls who love each other. But there's also nothing more terrifying. Making the leap into holy matrimony is one thing, but what happens when the leap is into something not even remotely holy, something truly and simply evil?
What's that? You want to be scared? Come with me. You will experience tales of horror, ghosts, and death. It is not recommended for the weak at heart. Listen in the dark. It's more fun that way. This is Weekly Spooky.
Hello, my spookies. It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. It's time for a little spooky in your weekly. I'm your host and narrator, Enrique Couto, and while you may not have been fully aware, I was actually gone for the last 10 days, but I made sure you had something scary to listen to while I was away. And now, I'm so happy to be back in front of the microphone, bringing you even more scares every single week. And I want to mention this Monday is the return of Terrifying and True. That's right. We'll be back to releasing new true crime and folklore stories every Monday. So make sure you don't miss that. Also, this Friday, you're going to get a brand new interview with myself from the Horror 421 podcast. It's a good listen, a lot of fun, and it's hosted by our very own author, Charles Campbell. So make sure to check that out right here on Friday. Now, before we get to our story of murderous marriage, I want to say thank you so much for joining us, especially during this time of year. You see, in February and March, it's not quite the height of Weekly Spooky. That's October, November, and December. Right now, if you're listening to this, you are a die-hard spooky, and we really appreciate your listening. If you want to support the program as we continue to bring you your spooky on the weekly for a 4th year in a row, just head to weeklyspooky.com. Click on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you support the show directly and get 2 bonus shows for your trouble. And that's every single month, by the way. But now, my dears, it's time for us to head back to Strickfield, because I understand there's a wedding, and we're all invited. So put on your dancing shoes and get ready to pocket some free shrimp. That story will begin in just a moment, but first, a quick word. Till Death Do Us Part by Rob Fields. 14 months ago. Ain't a church supposed to be a safe, sacred place? Ain't all churches considered the house of God? Y'all wouldn't have known that if you was at the Strickfield Community Church. It was Saturday afternoon and my best friend was supposed to be marrying her fella. You'd have thought it'd be a happy scene. The guests invited filled many of the pews there. You would have seen the minister herself, Delphine Brewster Sloan, conducting the wedding between my girl, Whitney Mirren, and her fella, her high school sweetheart. But you see, I know what Whitney knows. The fella ain't been faithful to Whitney. In fact, I done seen her cheating. Twice. With different women. First time was with Whitney's mama. And a couple days ago, her fella was putting the screws to a stripper at his bachelor party. Whitney's fella knew I knew about him and Whitney's mama and swore up and down he'd kill me if I done told her. But that's just it. I told Whitney. She ain't none believed me about her mama, but she done saw what I saw with that stripper. Whitney was fuming to kill her fella right then and there. Honestly, I would have thought she would have ended the wedding. But the wedding happened, and everything started off like you'd expect a wedding to start. Then, it happened. Whitney suddenly turned and faced everybody. but y'all wouldn't recognize her. When I saw her, I done peed myself. Whitney was a ghost bride right out of some horror flick. Her eyes glowed red and her skin was like shining marble. She done completely looked like some other girl. Suddenly, Whitney pointed past the crowd. I swear y'all could have heard every door in here locking fast. Minister Brewster Sloan shrieked and stepped away from the couple. "Almighty God in heaven!" she choked out. Whitney turned to her. "God doesn't exist here," she laughed coldly. "Or he would have appeared when you asked if there was a reason why my groom and I shouldn't be married." Whitney's suddenly pointing right at her fella while holding her bridal bouquet, which looks more like black roses now instead of the red ones originally. "You cheating bastard," she accused him. "Why did you even keep our wedding today when you don't even love me?" She screams now, making him fly out into the crowd. Then she drops the bouquet. "You betrayed me, lover, but we'll have one hell of an event here today." When that Whitney thing went out into the crowd, the guests ran to the doors. I knew deep down they wouldn't budge none. When I tried running, Whitney was suddenly right there. "I know you tried telling me about his cheating, and I wouldn't listen. But you still get to be my maid of honor." Whitney turned and went to her fella. Boy, was he ever begging and pleading for Whitney to let him live. Whitney smiled at him. "I'll spare your life if you can show that you're faithful to whomever you truly do give your black heart to." She raised her finger. "But be warned, if I see you're still unfaithful, then I'll return for you on your wedding day." Whitney turned her attention to the crowd and laughed insanely as she went and painted the church with the blood from the guests. I peed myself again at the horror I was seeing. I was a mess when Whitney returned to me, her once beautiful bridal gown now all wet and red itself. Whitney's mouth was full of blood. Then she licked her fingers like she'd done finished a good helping of ribs on Memorial Day. "I know you tried to tell me about Mom. Oh, but I just ate her black heart." She smiled a toothy smile. "Don't worry, Ariane. You and the minister get to live." Next thing I knew, Whitney picked up her bouquet of black roses. Then I remembered where she got them from. Whitney's mama found them for her at a stand at Jamie's flea market near the village limits on the west side. There was this booth set up called Tinker's. The man there was selling odd junk, but he also had this bridal bouquet in his refrigerator off to the side and made her an offer she couldn't refuse. Whitney's mama was such a cheapskate, even with Whitney. Whitney smiled now, almost forgot the most important part. Whitney shoved the bouquet of black roses into my arms. I hissed when my fingers got cut by them thorns. I was bleeding on the flowers now. Soon they all turned red again, as before. Whitney pointed at me. "You're getting married next, girl." She lowered her hand. "Hopefully you'll find a man that'll worship the ground you walk on, because I sure didn't." She turned to her fella. "Remember, if you're unfaithful to your next bride, I'll return for you and claim your soul." Then Whitney laughed this horrible laughter as she suddenly caught fire and started burning. The minister and I escaped the church as it caught fire and burned to the ground. I didn't know about the minister, but I knew I'd never forget that day, as long as I lived. The present. I'd taken that next big step with my fellow once I'd finally taken a long shower and had a few too many nightmares about Whitney Mirren's wedding. Lance Westerhold and I had been seeing each other off and on for a long time. I couldn't tell you why we kept getting back together and backing off each other. I couldn't even tell you how many times we fucked again and again. I admit without reservations, I ain't pretty and ain't no prize to catch. I know for a fact Lance has fucked other girls who could have been sex stars. Lance could have done way better than me. I even joke about being beaten with an ugly stick by my mama many times. I never understood to this day why guys think I'm some kind of prize. Getting back to Lance, I was just leaving Woody's drive-in after finishing my open to close. Yeah, I was a car hop who served people on roller skates. What's really fucked up, I actually loved working there. Yeah, y'all heard me. I loved being on my skates all day. Pay ain't for shit, but I get me some damn good tips. I was walking home to my trailer when Lance pulled up beside me in his Dodge Charger. Now you talking about a complete mismatch here. Lance was one of them handsome, muscular mechanics you'd see in an older romance movie. I was just a scrawny, ugly thing. He had that nice car and I had my roller skates. He lived in a small house. I was just trailer trash. Lance was the kind of guy who knew what he wanted and went and got it. I was the kind of girl who accepted her lot in life and lived with it. "Let me alone, Lance, God damn it," I yelled. "I ain't in no mood for your shit today." We was out on Township Road 113, not far from my trailer. In other words, nobody was coming or going when Lance stopped me and started working his charms on me again. He started telling me I was the only woman for him. I told him he was so full of shit it was coming out his brown eyes. When I told him to fuck off again, he finally got out of his car and came to me. Then the fucker grabbed me and crushed me against him as he gagged me with his big tongue. Next thing I knew, he got my shorts off and was banging me in the back seat. Like I said, he had all them other hot pieces of ass he could be having whenever he wanted, and the dumb fuck kept coming right back to me. One more time, I am an ugly ass fucking girl. And no, Lance ain't been drinking, 'cause I'd have tasted it when he was sucking tongue with me. Also, Lance ain't my first, but I was definitely his. It was at Strickfield High when Lance saw me and Tammy Lesher at a football game. My girl and I were smoking a bowl together when Lance approached us. Now, Tammy was one of them hot girls Lance could have had whenever he wanted, but he couldn't keep his eyes off of me. When Tammy went back to the game, Lance grabbed a hold of me and took me where no nosy Parker could see us. I kept insisting Tammy could have given him a much better time than me, but he stripped me naked and gave me his cherry. I ain't telling you how I knew I was his first, but believe me when I say, I knew. Like I said, we've been off and on, in and out of bed together, in and out of relationships, and now we was in the back seat of his car. I never saw it coming. After he'd fucked me twice, he'd said it right to my very lips. "Marry me, Ariane." Nothing much surprised me after Whitney's wedding, except that. "The fuck you say?" "Marry me, Ariane," he repeated. We looked at each other for the longest time, then I scoffed. "Fuck you." "Marry me, Ariane," he whispered to my lips one more time. We looked at each other for the longest time again. Then I told him the closest thing to a yes he was going to get. "Fuck you," I muttered. Then he fucked me a couple more times in his back seat to make our engagement official. Anyway, that's how I keep remembering it as I'm getting out of bed and leaving Lance sleeping. I go into the bathroom and look in the mirror. My ugly ass face was staring right back at me. At first, I was gonna laugh for even dreaming Lance asked me to marry him till I'm feeling the weight on my left hand and raise it to see the big glowing rock he put on my finger. I come back out and look at Lance as he keeps snoring away. Now, unlike Whitney, I know exactly what to expect from my fella. Yeah, I know goddamn well he's gonna keep fucking other women, like I'm gonna keep fucking other fellas. And we're getting married? The rock on my finger says we are. Okay, knowing what I know about Lance, all I'm wondering is, why? I ain't rich. Like I said, I'm a car hop at an old-time drive-in. I own this trailer in the land it rests on that my folks left me outright, and it's my only lot in life. Only thing I'm thinking is, I gotta be one hell of a hot fuck. I shake my head and keep wondering how I keep getting laid when fellas shouldn't want to touch me with a 10-foot pole. And then I see that fucking bouquet of flowers Whitney Mirren gave me, at that wedding from hell all them months ago. Yeah, it's been months, and them flowers, they're still looking like I just picked them up at the flower shop. They're still red as the blood I bled on them that day. I went and picked up the bouquet, then I shook my head slowly. Fuck you. I took them fucking flowers outside, not giving two shits who'd drive by and see me naked. I tossed them into the fire pit I burned shit in. After soaking them down good in gasoline and lighting them up, I'm amazed yet again. Not only am I getting married, them flowers from hell ain't even burning up, even after making the flames go real high. Then the fire finally goes out. Them flowers are still there. I reach into the pit and pull them out. They ain't even warm. Next thing I knew, Lance is out here with me. He cradled me into him from behind so we can swap spit and morning breath and a kiss. The day of the wedding is finally here. It definitely wouldn't be a very big one, but there was enough people on both my side and his that came. Believe it or not, Lance's parents paid for our wedding. Now, I know for a fact Lance's parents ain't never liked me none too much. I even heard his daddy telling him he could do so much better than me. Hell, I even told Lance he could do way better than me. All the dumbass says back to me is, I love you, Ariane, and I'm marrying you. Keep in mind, I ain't never said I loved him, but I think he knew I'd stay with him when I'd let him fuck me 6 ways from Sunday, even after I knew he'd just fucked another woman, or when I'd show up walking funny in his place. Yet, he still wants to marry me. Well, fuck it then. Getting back to the wedding, we was wearing normal dress clothes, fuck being all formal and everything. Lance comes and looks at me before the wedding. Forget he ain't supposed to see the bride before the wedding, right? We're alone with each other now. You just know we're gonna be miserable together, right? I tell him. You can do so much better than me. Last chance to tell me to fuck off. I promise you no hard feelings. He just pulls me into his arms and stares deep into my eyes. I love you. I laugh a little. And you're off your fucking rocker leaving that rich girl all to her own at your wedding rehearsal. Not just a rich girl, a Mirren. You do know Mirrens are rich as fuck, right? Yet your dumb ass done stood her up when you came to my trailer and fucked me. We stare at each other again. Then he kisses me one more time before leaving me before our wedding. Suddenly that fucking bouquet of flowers is right there on the table. I take them in my hands and hold them in front of me. The bloody red flowers turn deathly black. Funny thing, not only have I continued having nightmares about Whitney's wedding, but I keep having nightmares about some of her last moments before the wedding. I'd swear I was looking right through her own eyes. That rich girl found herself a fella whom thought the world of her the way she did him. Her girls she went to Strickfield High with kept telling her he wasn't no good for her. She wouldn't listen. I saw everything, like I was Whitney Mirren herself. She gave this man her everything. She gave him her heart. She gave him her body. However he wanted to do her, she thought she did everything right. Then the wedding came and Whitney got this very bouquet. Whitney's mom especially ordered him just for her from a man named Isley Tinker. Turned out he was doing flowers on the side of selling odds and ends at a junk shop. When Whitney got the flowers, her fingers got pricked by the thorns. Same when Whitney put them in my hands. After Whitney bled all over him, she learned the truth about her fella. He was never once loyal to her. Whitney's fella fucked around on her again and again. The more she saw, the more she burned, hot as hell. And at the Strickfield Community Church, where the wedding was to take place, Whitney turned into a bride from hell and slaughtered everyone in that particular church, including the church people themselves, save Minister Brewster Sloan. Remember when I said I know everything there is to know about Lance? You see, Lance was the fella fucking around on Whitney Mirren over a year ago. I knew damn well he was going to marry her. I even agreed to be Whitney's maid of honor. But goddamn if Lance wouldn't stop fucking me anyways. Only reason Whitney didn't kill his ass that day was 'cause he begged her for his life, promising he'd be a better man. She said she'd hold him to it. Now that fucking music's playing for me to make my entrance, everybody's gasping at me now. No, not 'cause I'm one ugly fucking girl about to marry Lance Westerhold. It's because I became Whitney Mirren herself now. I'm the same ghostly bride Whitney became, all because of having them fucking flowers. The doors are all locked tight, and I'm seeing the look on Lance's face. He wants to run as our relatives are exploding all over the place and painting the Strickfield Chapel the unholy red wedding it needs to be. Lance is looking at me now, knowing he fucked up royally. In fact, it's only him, the preacher man, and me now. Lance don't even try running away. I'm ready, I tell the preacher man in Whitney Mirren's disembodied voice. The preacher man stammers through the usual wedding lines with Lance. Lance is looking like he's ready to piss himself, but he looks at me and says, I do. Now the preacher man stammers the same lines to me, except he calls me Whitney Mirren, since that's who I am now. When he finishes, the preacher man and Lance wait my answer. I look at Lance with my glowing eyes and smile sweetly. Till death do us part. And then I drop my cursed bouquet to pull Lance to me and seal our unholy union with a kiss. Then the preacher man watches us burst into flames as I'm taking Lance straight to hell with me. Well, my spookies, I hope you enjoyed that story of nefarious nuptials as much as I did telling it, and a big thank you to our good buddy and Strickfield mastermind, Rob Fields, for another great story on another great Wednesday. I hope you're all doing very well. I hope your weeks are moving along well, and I hope our story helped it all along the way. And I want to say a giant thank you to our Patreon backers. We're at 100, baby! That's something I've been hoping for a long time, and it means the world to me. And if you want to join in, just go to weeklyspooky.com and click on Patreon. $1 a month gets you 2 stories every single month. And right now, it's the series, The Weekend by Rob Fields, all about a group of teenagers who head to an abandoned campground for a weekend of fun, but they find bloody vengeance instead. And speaking of Patreon, I want to say an extra special thank you to our Patreon podcast boosters. These are folks who pay just a little bit more to hear their names at the end of every show. And they are Johnny Nix, John Callan, Bobbletopia.com, Jenny Green, Brent McCullough, Karen Wiemet, Jack Kerr, and Craig Cohen. Thank you all so much. And if you want to hear your name at the end of every episode, all you have to do is go to weeklyspooky.com, click on Patreon, and select $15 or more per month. And I'll be reading your name with my silky smooth, yet oddly spooky voice. And we do appreciate it a whole hell of a lot. It's how we keep the spooky coming every single week for over 4 years and counting. But now, my friends, I need a nap before I get ready to launch the new season of Terrifying and True next Monday. So for now, please stay safe, but stay spooky. And I'll be back before you know it with even more terrifying tales. For myself, for our executive producers Rob Fields and Mark Shields, for my producer Dan Wilder, and our composer Ray Mattis, I will talk at you next time.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to find your way back next week. But for now, you are safe. Trust me.